Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into one of history's most chaotic episodes, the Great Depression. Not the emotional kind you get after scrolling Zillow, but the real one. The 1929 stock market crash. A time when men in top hats jumped from windows, fortunes evaporated faster than your paycheck on payday, and everyone suddenly became an amateur economist without Google. Before we spiral into existential dread, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim those lights, adjust your pillows, maybe pour yourself a drink, something less flammable than bathtub gin. Get cozy, because tonight we're drifting back to a time when people thought investing in powdered milk was a good idea. Let's get curious for a second. What did a Wall Street banker's morning routine look like when the Dow was tanking? How did people cope before Xanax and TikTok? What did they eat when they could no longer afford steak tartare? Did it just become tartare-less steak? Why were men in hats jumping out of windows? Was it really that bad? Or just very dramatic cardio? And perhaps most importantly, could you, dear listener, survive in a world where your life savings vanished before breakfast and breadlines replaced brunch? Congratulations. You've just woken up at 1929. The air smells faintly of despair and cigarette smoke. You own 20 shares of US Steel, a nice suit, and a rapidly crumbling sense of optimism. Welcome to Wall Street. The day begins like any other, except that today, your newspaper headline reads like a horror novel. The stock ticker has gone rogue. Brokers are sweating through their collars. You sip your coffee, which suddenly tastes like regret. It's 9:30 a.m., and the market bell is about to ruin your life. The office hums with nervous energy, that tense, electric kind that makes your stomach feel like it's hosting a jazz band. The walls are lined with charts that no longer make sense. The smell of ink and cigarette smoke thick enough to chew. You glance around at your colleagues, all of whom look like they've aged 10 years since breakfast. One man's hand trembles so badly that his cigarette becomes a fire hazard. Another is muttering numbers to himself like a prayer. Except in this church, the gods have gone bankrupt. The bell rings. A sharp, metallic clang that usually means opportunity. Today it sounds more like a death knell. The floor erupts in chaos. Paper flies, phones ring. Men shout in numbers that no longer mean anything. It's like watching the economy have a seizure in real time. You grip your desk for balance, pretending you understand what's happening. But your only thought is, this can't be good for lunch plans. You glance at the ticker, your old friend, your golden goose. But now it's printing disaster in fast motion. US Steel, down. General Motors, down. Even Coca-Cola is flat. Nothing makes sense. The line between temporary dip and financial apocalypse has officially disappeared. And you're right in the middle of it, holding a pencil that's shaking like a tuning fork. Your boss bursts out of his office, tie crooked, face glistening like an overcooked ham. "Stay calm," he shouts, which is, of course, the universal signal to panic. He tries to rally the troops with words like correction and opportunity, but his voice keeps cracking like a bad radio signal. Someone asks if they should start buying. Someone else asks if it's too late to sell. You consider asking if it's too late to run. By 10 a.m., the phones are screaming. Clients want answers, reassurance, refunds, preferably all three. You repeat the company line. Markets fluctuate, temporary setback, long-term growth, even though you no longer believe a word of it. It's like telling a man in a burning building that fire builds character. Your coffee's gone cold. Your palms are slick, and your collar feels 2 sizes too small. You step outside for air. But the street is worse. a sea of men in suits, all wearing the same expression, mild disbelief, with a side of existential dread. A newspaper boy shouts the headlines, "Market crashes, fortunes lost," like he's selling popcorn at the apocalypse. You give him a nickel anyway, might as well support small businesses. Back inside, the mood has shifted from panic to a sort of grim resignation. The office no longer feels like a temple of capitalism. It feels like the waiting room of a very large, very broke hospital. Someone laughs, loud and a little hysterical, and it echoes through the room like a gunshot. You wonder if this is how Rome felt when it fell, except with more paperwork. At 11 a.m., someone tries to make a joke about buying the dip. Nobody laughs. You catch your reflection in the window, pale, tense, your hair slightly off, and think. So this is what financial ruin looks like. You almost admire it. There's a certain poetry in watching your dreams implode before lunch. By noon, you've stopped checking the ticker. It feels pointless, like checking your pulse after being hit by a train. The numbers keep falling, and so does your faith in arithmetic. You hear someone in the corner quietly praying. Another man starts packing his things. You do neither. You just sit there, staring at the phone, waiting for a call that won't come, because no one can afford long-distance optimism anymore. The day stretches on endlessly. The air grows stale, the laughter dies, and the ticker keeps clattering like a typewriter documenting the end of an era. Eventually, you take off your jacket, loosen your tie, and just breathe. You've spent years climbing the rungs of the financial ladder, only to discover it's been leaning against a collapsing building. When the closing bell finally rings, it doesn't sound like the end of a workday. It sounds like a eulogy. The floor goes silent. You gather your papers, meaningless now, and head for the door. The city outside hums with muted despair. You pass a man selling apples on the corner and wonder if he was one of yours. A broker yesterday, a fruit vendor today. You take one last look back at the exchange, that marble monument to ambition, and realize something quietly tragic. It's not just your money that's gone, it's your certainty, your illusion of control, your belief that the world made sense. Then you straighten your tie, nod to the streetlight flickering above you, and start walking. Because even when everything crashes, life doesn't stop ringing its closing bell. It just expects you to show up again tomorrow, coffee in hand, regret freshly brewed. You light your 20th cigarette of the morning because breathing air feels too optimistic. The office smells like caffeine, sweat, and impending doom. Someone yells, "Sell everything!" and for once, everyone listens. The room is chaos, not the fun kind, like a surprise birthday party, but the kind where men in suspenders argue about who still technically owns their house. The smoke is so thick it could qualify for a tax exemption. Papers fly, telephones ring like fire alarms, and the only thing louder than the shouting is your own heartbeat trying to file for early retirement. You can't tell if you're sweating from stress or the 7 cups of coffee you've ingested since sunrise. Either way, you're 80% caffeine, 20% despair. You clutch your cup, lukewarm, bitter, and probably flammable, and stare into it like it's going to explain what went wrong. Just last week, you were a genius. The market was soaring. Everyone was talking about buying on margin like it was a cheat code for wealth. Now, it's like the universe has turned margin into punishment. You take another drag and wonder how many cigarettes it takes to buy peace of mind. The answer, apparently, is more than you can afford. Your coworker Mitchell bursts past you, waving a handful of sell orders like a man trying to smother a fire with confetti. "It's temporary," he insists, his left eye twitching like a telegram from the abyss. The fundamentals are strong, he adds, right before spilling coffee down his vest. You both pause, watch the stains spread, and realize the fundamentals aren't strong, not for the economy, and definitely not for Mitchell's dry cleaning bill. At 10 a.m., the phones have become an orchestra of panic. Brokers bark into receivers, their voices hoarse and cracking, begging clients to stay calm, while their own hands tremble like maracas. The switchboard girls move like machines, mechanical, precise, unstoppable, passing panic from one end of the city to the other. Every conversation sounds the same. No, Mr. Thompson. It's not too late to sell. Oh, wait, yes, it is. You refill your coffee, though it no longer tastes like coffee. It tastes like anxiety filtered through despair. The pot sits on the edge of the desk, dark and overworked, much like you. Someone offers you a lump of sugar. You decline. Sweetness feels like a betrayal. Across the room, a man you barely know stands up on his chair and starts shouting numbers. You're not sure if he's quoting stock prices or reciting his will. Either way, nobody listens. The only thing that matters now is survival, or at least the illusion of it. The smell of burnt tobacco and cheap cologne mixes into something uniquely tragic. You watch as a senior partner, the kind of man who used to brag about his golf scores, quietly slips his Rolex into his pocket. Not to check the time, but to make sure he can still pawn it later. You wonder if your wristwatch would fetch enough for lunch. At 11:15, the office boy faints. He's about 12, underpaid, and has probably inhaled enough smoke to qualify for a chimney sweep's pension. Nobody notices. You pick up his dropped papers, stock reports from yesterday, utterly meaningless now, and toss them into the bin. It feels symbolic, like throwing your future into a trash fire. Someone starts crying in the corner. Another laughs hysterically. You realize they're both reacting to the same piece of news, just in different fonts of despair. You take a deep breath of the tar-thick air and consider joining in. But no, you're a professional. Professionals combust quietly. By noon, your shirt clings to you like a desperate investment. The floor looks like a battlefield. Papers trampled, chairs overturned, ash scattered like snowfall. The coffee pot is empty. The cigarette box too. You think about getting more, but stepping outside means facing the real world, the crowds, the rumors, the sound of a million wallets snapping shut. You decide you're safer here, in your nicotine-scented bunker of denial. Your boss, red-faced and trembling, emerges again to deliver what can only be described as a motivational breakdown. "Gentlemen," he declares, "the market will recover." The room stares at him like he's just claimed the Titanic is unsinkable. He stammers something about temporary volatility before someone asks if temporary can be measured in decades. He retreats, defeated. You light another cigarette, your 21st probably, and inhale deeply. The smoke curls in the air like an apology. You lean back in your chair and stare at the ceiling, where the plaster is starting to crack. You wonder if it'll collapse before the market does. Outside the window, the city keeps moving. Carriages, pedestrians, newsboys shouting headlines about disaster. The world hasn't stopped, which feels unfair. You take one last gulp of cold coffee and flick the ash from your cigarette into the empty cup. For a moment, it looks poetic, like the end of an era captured in one sad, smoky swirl. Then the phone rings again, shrill and desperate. And you answer it, because that's what you do. You sell illusions for a living. Or at least, you used to. The ticker machine clatters like an overworked typewriter having a breakdown. Each number printed feels like a personal insult. You watch as your investments vanish, not slowly, but spectacularly. like fireworks made of your future. It's mesmerizing in a terrible way, like watching your house burn down, but in Morse code. The thin strip of paper keeps unspooling from the machine, a river of doom flowing across the desk. You can almost hear it mocking you with each letter it prints. IBM, down 6, US. Steel down 10, dignity down infinite. The sound is relentless, a steady mechanical heartbeat for an economy that's flatlining. You stare, hypnotized, as the tape curls onto the floor like a serpent of bad news. Around you, men gather in clusters, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. One of them whispers, "It's just a correction." Another mutters, "So was the Titanic." You want to laugh, but your mouth has forgotten how. The room feels smaller now. The smell of sweat, ink and cigarette smoke mixes with the faint tang of fear. Someone's hand trembles as they tear a piece of ticker tape, reading it as if it were the last line of a tragic novel. The numbers don't even look real anymore. They're just abstract art made of suffering. Your boss leans over your shoulder, eyes bloodshot, breathing heavily like a man who just lost a bet with fate. "Keep calm," he says, voice cracking under the strain. "The fundamentals are solid." You glance at the tape printing another string of losses and think, "So is the ground." Until you hit it. You remember when that machine used to be your favorite sound in the world. A promise of prosperity. Each clatter like coins falling into a jar. It used to sing of opportunity, of ambition, of champagne on Fridays. Now it just hisses despair. Every new line feels like another nail in the coffin of the American dream. Nailed shut with perfect mechanical precision, a younger broker rushes over, his tie askew, holding a handful of tape like a prophecy. "It's off the charts," he says breathlessly. You glance at the tiny digits, and for once he's not exaggerating, the tape is literally too fast to read. The machine spits it out in an endless blur, as if even technology can't keep up with human stupidity. The noise grows louder, faster, manic. It's as though the machine is panicking with you, chattering its teeth, confessing your sins in shorthand. The clerk assigned to keep track of it all is now just dumping the endless stream of numbers into a basket because what's the point? The data is coming faster than anyone can process. And the truth is, nobody wants to process it anyway. Someone shouts across the room, "We're 30 points down." Another yells, "Make it 40." The two lock eyes like duelists at dawn, each hoping the other is lying. A man slams his fist into the wall, another into his desk. The ticker doesn't care. It just keeps printing, unbothered, unfeeling, mechanical. If it could talk, it would probably say, "Should have sold in August." By midday, the floor is buried in paper. The ticker tape snakes across every surface, desks, chairs, even the floor, like a carpet woven entirely from regret. The janitor stands in the corner holding a broom, staring at it all with quiet disbelief. He's the only one in the room who's still technically solvent. The clatter finally slows, not because the machine pities you, but because it's jammed. The room goes quiet, the silence heavier than the noise ever was. You realize you've been gripping your pencil so tightly it's snapped in half. You drop it, flex your fingers, and feel the dull ache of reality settling in. Someone coughs, another whispers, "Maybe it's over." You look at the frozen machine, its mouth stuffed with tangled tape, and think, if only the economy could jam this neatly. But then the clerk reaches over, clears the jam, and the noise starts up again. A cruel resurrection. The rest of the afternoon blurs together in a fog of numbers, shouts, and disbelief. You stop checking the tape entirely. What's the point? It's like reading the obituary of your own wallet over and over again. The floor is ankle-deep in the debris of optimism. At 3 p.m., a man in the corner starts laughing, quietly at first, then louder. It's not a sane laugh. It's the sound of someone who's realized there's nothing left to lose. You envy him a little. He's found freedom in the absurdity of it all. As the market bell finally rings to close the day, the ticker machine slows, then falls silent. The room exhales collectively. You reach down and pick up a strand of ticker tape from the floor, a single line that reads, in its cruel simplicity, "Down 38 points." You fold it neatly, slide it into your pocket like a keepsake, and whisper, "You and me both." Because deep down, you know it's not just the market that crashed today, it's the illusion that anyone was ever really in control. Your boss insists everything is fine, while visibly vibrating at the atomic level. He quotes something about market correction and buying the dip, but his voice cracks on dip. You suspect the dip is the company itself. He stands there in his three-piece suit, or rather, what used to be a three-piece suit before stress turned it into a wearable sauna. His face glows with the sheen of denial. Behind him, the office ticker ticks out catastrophe. But he presses on, pacing like a man trying to outwalk fate. "Gentlemen," he says, clapping his hands together in a sound that's more moist than motivational. "This is just a temporary adjustment, a small ripple, a hiccup." You glance around. Everyone's pretending to take notes, but no one's writing anything. Jenkins is staring at the ceiling, lips moving silently like he's negotiating with a higher power. Mitchell's been stirring his coffee for 6 straight minutes without drinking it. The intern in the corner has gone so pale he looks like an unpaid ghost. The boss slaps the table for emphasis. "This is no time to panic," he declares, while panicking, his cufflinks rattle. He wipes his brow and smiles. The kind of smile that could qualify as a cry for help. "Remember, gentlemen, the market is cyclical. What goes down must come up." You want to point out that not everything that goes down comes back up. Elevators, careers, and apparently the stock market. But you hold your tongue. He's your boss, after all. Hierarchically speaking, his optimism is mandatory. Behind him, the ticker machine coughs out another string of bad news. You can see the numbers even from your seat. Down, down, down. The machine seems to mock him, printing disaster with machine-like cheer. He glances back at it once, then looks away quickly, as if avoiding eye contact with a mugger. "Gentlemen," he says again, louder this time, "remember 1907? We recovered then. And we'll recover now. You weren't alive in 1907, but judging by the expressions in the room, no one finds this comforting." Someone mutters, "Yeah, but that one didn't start with my mortgage." Another adds, "Or my wife's fur coat." Laughter ripples through the office. Thin, nervous, hollow. The boss doesn't acknowledge it. He straightens his tie, his 5th time this hour, and announces, "We must have faith in the American system." Faith. That word hangs in the air like cigarette smoke. Visible, choking, but ultimately insubstantial. He starts pacing again, talking about liquidity, confidence, and temporary imbalances, stringing jargon together like rosary beads of denial. His monologue turns into a sermon. Capitalism as religion, optimism as ritual. You half expect him to pull out a chalice and declare the Dow Jones sacred wine. Outside, you can hear the faint echo of shouting from the street. The crowd below is growing, journalists, investors, onlookers. The city is panicking out loud, while you're stuck in this office pretending not to. Someone opens a window for air, and the boss snaps. "Close that. We don't need drama." You all glance at the window anyway, exchanging silent thoughts no one dares to voice. As he continues, his confidence begins to fracture. He mispronounces recession. He knocks over a glass of water mid-sentence and doesn't even notice. His voice gets higher, faster, desperate. "Gentlemen, if we stay calm, everything will." He stops. The ticker clatters. Everyone turns. The latest numbers are bad. Worse than bad. Catastrophic. The room goes still. The boss swallows hard, stares at the tape, and then back at you. "Just noise," he says, a little too softly. "Just noise." You realize he's not talking to you anymore. He's talking to himself. He adjusts his vest again, hands shaking slightly, and says, "All right, everyone, let's take lunch." No one moves. The idea of lunch feels like an ancient ritual from a lost civilization. He stands there waiting for someone to agree, to make it all sound normal. Finally, you nod. Just to be kind. "Yes, sir. Lunch sounds good." The others follow, mumbling assent. As he walks back to his office, you catch him pause by the window. He stares out at the street, at the chaos below, and for just a moment, the mask drops. You see the fear, raw, human, unfiltered. The kind of fear that no title, no suit, no corner office can protect you from. Then he straightens his back, forces that corporate smile again, and disappears behind his door. The handle clicks shut. The room exhales. Mitchell mutters, "Well, at least he's consistent," and lights another cigarette. You look around at your colleagues, the scattered papers, the trembling hands, the tired eyes, and realize that everyone's pretending to believe him because the alternative is unthinkable. And maybe that's what leadership really is. Lying convincingly enough to give everyone else 10 more minutes of hope. The lunchroom has gone quiet. Nobody orders oysters anymore, just black coffee and existential dread. You chew a sandwich that tastes like disappointment and wonder how long you can survive on mustard and denial. The room, once a symphony of laughter, business chatter, and the clinking of cutlery against fine china, now sounds like a funeral reception hosted by accountants. Men sit hunched over their plates, staring into their coffee cups as if the secrets of the market might be spelled out in the steam. Even the waiter moves slower, as though time itself has been downgraded. A few months ago, this place was chaos in a good way. Deals were struck over steak and brandy. You remember the smell of cigars, the booming laughter, the confident slaps on the back. Now it's all whispers and the faint sound of chewing, the soundtrack of lost wealth. A fly lands on your sandwich. You let it. Protein is protein. Across the room, Jenkins pokes at his soup, which looks suspiciously like boiled water with ambition. "You think it'll bounce back?" he asks, not really looking at you. His voice cracks on bounce, as though it knows something he doesn't. "Sure, you lie. It always does." He nods, relieved by the comfort of false hope, and goes back to stirring nothing. That's the thing about panic. It doesn't spread through shouting. It spreads through silence. And right now, the silence is contagious. A waiter passes by, offering the day's special, beefless stew. You decline, pretending you're not hungry. Hunger feels embarrassing in a place once defined by excess. You sip your coffee, black, bitter, and barely warm, and wonder if this is what the end of capitalism tastes like. At the next table, a group of brokers huddles together, their voices low. You catch fragments of conversation, margin calls, defaults. Maybe Canada. One of them laughs, too loudly, too brightly. And the others join in because pretending is cheaper than therapy. Someone tries to lighten the mood with a joke. "At least we're still employed." The table erupts in the kind of laughter you only hear at funerals or very bad weddings. It dies down quickly, leaving behind a heavier silence than before. You glance at the clock. It's not even 1 yet. The day feels endless, like you're trapped in an elevator with anxiety. You unwrap another sandwich from your briefcase, stale bread and cheese that's starting to reconsider its identity. A few months ago, this would have been unacceptable. Now it's lunch. Possibly dinner. In the corner, the boss from upstairs, yes, that boss, eats alone. He cuts his meat into perfect squares, but he doesn't eat it. He just moves it around the plate like he's negotiating with it. Occasionally he glances at the door, maybe expecting someone to burst in with good news. Nobody does. A young messenger boy walks in, hat in hand, holding a slip of paper. The entire room turns to look at him, as if he's carrying the 10 Commandments. "It's from the exchange," he says softly. You can see his hand shaking. The manager takes it, reads, and folds it back up without a word. Whatever it says, it's not good. The boy leaves. The room doesn't move for a full minute. Finally, someone clears his throat, stands up, and says, "Well, I suppose that settles it." Nobody asks what it is. You already know. You push your plate away. Appetite feels like a luxury item now, the kind of thing you can't afford. You pull a cigarette from your pack, your third since the soup course that never arrived, and light it. The smoke curls upward, mingling with the stale air and whispered despair. For a brief moment, you imagine what it would be like to walk out of here and never come back. No more numbers, no more tape, no more pretending to understand what market correction really means. Just air, trees, sanity. Then you remember rent. As you stub out your cigarette, Jenkins leans over again. "Think I'll sell everything," he murmurs. You nod, though I know it's already too late. The selling's done. The crash is already written. The machine's just catching up. The waiter comes by with the bill, but nobody moves to pay. You all just stare at it. A small rectangle of paper, symbolizing everything wrong with the universe. Finally, someone mutters, "Put it on the firm." He nods, scribbles something, and walks away. You sit there in the lingering quiet, surrounded by the ghosts of wealth, and finish your cold coffee. It's bitter, acrid, honest. For the first time all day, something finally tastes exactly the way it should. Rumors start spreading faster than stock prices can fall. "Did you hear about Jenkins?" Someone whispers. The idea of jumping out the window becomes an inside joke, until you realize it isn't. Suddenly, everyone's looking at the windows a little too long. It starts innocently enough, like all bad ideas do. Someone makes a nervous quip about taking the fast way down, and half the office chuckles because laughter is easier than screaming. But then someone else doesn't laugh. They just stare, quiet, thoughtful, like they're running the math on terminal velocity. And that's when you realize the joke has started evolving into a business plan. The building itself doesn't help. It's tall, all marble and ambition, with windows that were once symbols of success, floor-to-ceiling glass designed to show off the sky and skyline. Now they just frame despair. You swear you can feel the draft calling to you, whispering, "What if you just didn't have to explain your portfolio tomorrow?" You catch Jenkins by the window one morning, cigarette dangling from his lips, staring out at the street below. He's calm. Too calm. You ask if he's all right. He smiles, that soft, unnerving smile people wear when they've made a decision. "Just getting some air," he says. You nod, pretending not to notice that the window's already half open. By noon, the rumor mill is in overdrive. Someone swears they saw Jenkins' hat floating down Wall Street. Someone else says he left a note written on the back of a stock certificate. Everyone's whispering. No one's confirming. The ticker keeps clattering, indifferent. You can feel the tension pressing against your temples like a migraine that's learned to breathe. The boss calls a meeting, because of course he does. "Gentlemen," he begins. "We must stay strong. The newspapers are exaggerating." But you can tell by his tone he's trying to convince himself. He gestures to the windows, which, in hindsight, was a poor choice, and adds, "Let's not let superstition take hold." Superstition. That's one word for it. You'd prefer collective existential meltdown. Outside, the street below is chaos. Crowds gather, half curious, half horrified. Newsboys yell headlines about the market in freefall. You start noticing men taking longer to close their ledgers, longer to light their cigarettes, longer to glance out the window. It's as if everyone's subconsciously measuring how far a man can fall before hitting the end of capitalism. The janitor starts locking the windows in the evenings. Officially, it's for draft control. Unofficially, it's to prevent anyone from turning gravity into an investment strategy. The locks click every night, like a metronome of human panic. By midweek, the jokes stop. Nobody mentions taking the plunge anymore. It's not funny when you're not sure who might try it next. You hear about a clerk over on Broad Street who slipped, another on the 14th floor who leaned too far. The newspapers call them tragic accidents. You call them statistics with good posture. You start avoiding the windows yourself, though they're everywhere. Reflective glass panes, catching your face, tired and pale. Eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. The reflection doesn't look like you anymore. It looks like someone who lost something invisible but essential. Hope, maybe. One afternoon, Mitchell cracks. He stands by the glass, muttering, "It'd be faster than this." You and two others quietly guide him back to his desk, pretending it's casual. Nobody says anything. There's no yelling, no scene, just silence. Because everyone knows it could be any of you. The newspapers run a story the next day. Banker jumps after market slide. The photo shows the street, the crowd, the chaos, not the man. The boss reads it out loud in a flat voice, then folds the paper and leaves it on the table like an abandoned confession. No one touches it. The mood in the office changes after that. People move slower, talk quieter. You can feel the heaviness in the air, grief, guilt, or just exhaustion. Maybe all three. Every sound is sharper now. The scratch of a pen, the tick of a clock, the faint hum of despair. Even the coffee tastes different, darker, somehow. You start taking the stairs more often, partly for exercise, mostly because you don't want to be near the windows. You tell yourself you're fine, that you'd never do something like that, but deep down, you understand the logic. It's not about dying. It's about wanting something, anything, to stop. Weeks pass, and the building installs heavier window frames. The papers move on to other tragedies. The markets, as markets do, begin their slow crawl back towards sanity. But the ghosts stay. You still see the smudges where hands once rested on the glass. You still flinch when the wind howls through the cracks. One day, you find Jenkins's name scratched faintly into a windowsill. You trace it with your thumb, and for a moment, you think about how fragile it all is. Money, pride, hope, everything balanced on a ledge thinner than glass. Then you close the blinds. You sit back at your desk, and you keep working. Because that's what everyone does after a fall. They pretend the ground never looked tempting at all. Outside, the street is chaos. Papers flutter like dying birds. A banker's hat sails down from a skyscraper, symbolic, tragic, and absurdly expensive. People gasp. The hat lands safely, but Jenkins doesn't. You look away. The crowd gathers quickly, a dense knot of hats and horror. Men in suits, women clutching purses, street vendors frozen mid-sale. All staring upward, then downward, in disbelief. The hat lies there perfectly still, a neat dome of felt and futility. It wobbles slightly in the wind, as if confused by its sudden freedom. For a second, it looks almost peaceful, a strange, elegant survivor of catastrophe. Someone whispers, "Was that Jenkins?" Someone else says, "No, couldn't be." But the silence that follows confirms what no one wants to admit. You've seen that hat before, every morning, perfectly tilted, polished, smug. It was practically Jenkins's brand, and now it's all that's left. You stand on the curb, caught between morbid curiosity and a gnawing sense of guilt. Around you, people crane their necks, pointing at the building's upper floors. A few reporters sprint toward the scene, their notebooks already open, eager to turn tragedy into headlines. "Wall Street man leaps to death," one of them shouts, as if rehearsing the title. Even grief gets commodified. The papers continue to swirl in the wind. Pink slips, bond sheets, stock ledgers, confetti for a dying empire. You bend down and pick up a scrap. It's a trading slip for US Steel, numbers scrawled across it like the record of a lost bet. You crumble it in your hand, not sure why. Maybe because it feels too much like holding a receipt for someone's soul. The policeman arrives, blowing his whistle with all the authority of a man who can't fix anything but noise. "Move along," he shouts. Nobody moves. How could you? History is happening right in front of you, and it's wearing a bowler hat. You can feel the weight of the building above. The massive, gleaming towers of ambition that once scraped the sky with pride. Now they feel like cliffs. For years, people climbed them for success. Now they're using them for exits. A man next to you mutters, "Poor devil." Another adds, "He had money last week." There's pity in their voices, but also something else, relief maybe, that it wasn't them. The human version of survivor's guilt, wrapped in a fine wool coat. A gust of wind lifts the fallen hat and pushes it gently down the street. It tumbles end over end, rolling past shoe shiners and newsboys, past a man selling apples from a crate. The absurdity of it all strikes you. The hat gets to keep moving, Jenkins doesn't. Back inside the exchange, the atmosphere is heavier than the smoke. People talk about Jenkins in hushed tones, the way one might discuss a cautionary tale. The jokes from earlier, about the fast way down, about liquidating assets, vanish like profit margins. You can't even bring yourself to sit by the window. Your boss, visibly shaken, calls for a moment of silence. It lasts 3 seconds before the ticker starts up again. The sound of clattering numbers fills the room, indifferent as ever. The machine doesn't care who fell, only how far the Dow did. You pour yourself another coffee, though your hands shake as you lift the cup. You tell yourself Jenkins was just one man, one unlucky, unstable man, the kind who couldn't handle a little turbulence. But deep down, you know it's a lie. The system chewed him up and spat him out, and you're still on the conveyor belt. Out the window, the street sweeper arrives. He pauses briefly at the scene, tipping his cap, then sweeps up the papers and dust. The hat's gone now, carried away by the wind or by some souvenir hunter with a morbid sense of irony. Life, it seems, has already moved on. By evening, the newsboys are shouting the story. Banker's death shocks Wall Street. People buy the papers, shake their heads, and keep walking. Tomorrow there will be another headline, another name, another fall. You leave the office late, long after sunset. The city glows faintly in the fog, electric lights flickering like nervous thoughts. You pass the spot where the hat landed. It's clean now, scrubbed of evidence. Only a faint, dark scuff remains on the pavement, like a signature written in shadow. You stop, adjust your own hat, and stare at the sky. It's vast and indifferent, The same sky Jenkins must have looked at seconds before he jumped. Maybe he saw the same thing you see now. Endless grey, endless height, endless pressure. You pull your hat down tighter and keep walking. The wind picks up again, whispering through the alleyways, lifting loose papers and dust. For a moment, one sheet rises high above the street, spinning weightlessly in the air. And just for a second, you could swear it looks like that hat again, floating, free, perfectly untethered from the ruin below. Back inside, the partners gather. Everyone speaks in hushed tones, as if volume could summon hope. Someone mentions liquidity issues, and another mutters, "So do my tears." You take notes on a pad that will never be invoiced. The meeting room smells like old cigars and fresh despair. Heavy velvet curtains block out the daylight, as though the sun itself might make things worse. Around the long mahogany table sit the remnants of empire. Once powerful men now reduced to fidgeting with their cufflinks. They used to walk in here like kings. Today, they look like survivors of a shipwreck, arguing over who gets the last biscuit. At the head of the table sits Mr. Pembroke, the senior partner, or, as you've quietly started calling him, the captain of the Titanic, sans violin. His face is pale, his tie slightly askew, and his voice trembles with forced authority. "Gentlemen," he begins, "let's remain calm. We've weathered storms before." You glance around the table. Nobody looks convinced. Jenkins's chair is empty, and everyone is very pointedly pretending not to notice. A half-finished cup of coffee still sits in front of it, cold, like the hope in Dart. Is leavened on ard to the room. Pembroke clears his throat and taps the ledger in front of him. "We need solutions, not panic." His assistant flips open a folder labeled Emergency Strategy, though it's mostly blank pages. That feels about right. Someone from accounting coughs delicately. "If we liquidate non-essentials, we could cover payroll for another 2 weeks." "Non-essentials?" Another partner snaps. "What's non-essential?" "The rent, the phones, the staff, the coffee," someone mutters under their breath. It gets a few tired laughs, the kind of laughter that sounds like coughing up dust. You're still dutifully taking notes, though you suspect none of this will matter. It's like documenting the minutes of a slow-motion explosion. Each word feels performative, a formality meant to disguise helplessness. "Gentlemen," Pembroke says again, voice rising an octave, "panic is contagious." He pauses, then adds quietly, "But so is confidence." "That's a lovely thought," whispers Mr. Hollingsworth, staring into his untouched whiskey. "Unfortunately, you can't buy bread with thoughts." The room goes quiet again. The only sound is the faint hum of the ceiling fan, which clicks every few seconds like it's marking time until bankruptcy. Someone suggests cutting salaries. Someone else suggests merging with another firm. Another proposes prayer. Nobody has the courage to laugh at that last one. You look at the blackboard, once filled with grand projections, profits, dividends, expansions. Now it's wiped clean except for 2 lonely words written in chalk. Margin call. It feels more like a threat than a reminder. Pembroke suddenly slams his fist down, rattling the inkwells. "We are not beaten," he declares, his voice shaking somewhere between command and plea. "This is a temporary downturn." The room looks at him with pity. One man stares at his shoes. Another studies his pocket watch like it holds the answer. You wonder if this is what leadership looks like. Convincing yourself long after the audience has stopped believing. The minutes stretch on. Plans are proposed, dissected, discarded. Sell assets. Restructure debt. Call the bank. Call every bank. Someone mentions calling Washington. Someone else says Washington's already busy with their own collapse. Then there's Jenkins' name again, whispered awkwardly, like a curse. His accounts were substantial, one partner murmurs. We should manage the messaging. You feel a cold shiver crawl up your spine. Manage the messaging. That's how people talk when they're rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Pembroke rubs his temples and mutters, Gentlemen, let's focus. This firm has a reputation to maintain. It's ironic, really, reputation is the only thing they still think they own. You scribble that line in the margin of your notebook. It feels poetic. Maybe someday you'll read it to an empty room and call it wisdom. As the meeting drags toward evening, the light outside fades to gold, then grey. The office boy brings in another pot of coffee, the fifth one today, and nobody touches it. The smell alone makes your stomach churn. Finally, Pembroke sighs. Gentlemen, we'll reconvene tomorrow. Bring solutions. And faith. We'll need both. The men rise slowly, scraping chairs across the floor. They leave in silence, shuffling out like mourners at their own funeral. You linger behind, staring at the empty chairs and half-smoked cigars. The air feels heavy with ghosts. Not just Jenkins, but the ghosts of money, ambition, certainty. You close your notebook and tuck it under your arm. The pages are filled with words, lots of them, but none that mean anything anymore. As you turn to leave, you notice Jenkins' cold coffee still sitting there. For a moment, you almost reach out to take it away. Then you stop. It feels wrong to disturb it, like touching an artifact from a lost civilization. You walk out quietly, closing the door behind you. From the hall, you can still hear the faint sound of the ticker down the corridor. Distant, relentless, unfeeling. It's still printing numbers, still pretending the world makes sense. Inside the boardroom, the empty chairs sit in perfect order, waiting for tomorrow's meeting that won't change a thing. At home, your wife asks, "How was work?" You consider answering honestly, but decide she doesn't need that kind of nightmare before dinner. You say, "Oh, volatile." She serves soup. You wish it were whiskey. The dining room feels smaller tonight. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of smallness that comes from shrinking hopes and unpaid bills. The wallpaper seems louder than usual, its floral pattern mocking you with relentless cheer. The clock ticks too loudly. The silverware clinks like nervous applause. Your wife, Margaret, moves gracefully between kitchen and table, wearing that calm, unshakable expression women have perfected after realizing men are one bad day away from ruin. She's dressed nicely, as if to convince herself that everything's still fine. You notice she's serving the good china again, a ritual of denial. When the world's falling apart, you at least want it to fall apart elegantly. She sits down across from you, folds her napkin, and gives that polite, expectant smile. "So," she says, "what's all this I'm hearing about Wall Street?" You freeze mid-spoonful. The soup is thin, more hot water than sustenance, but it suddenly feels like a trap. You try to keep your tone casual. "Oh, you know how the papers exaggerate. A few investors got skittish, that's all." She raises an eyebrow. "Skittish?" Harold from the bank said people are jumping out of windows. You cough into your napkin, mostly to buy time. "Well," you say carefully, "the windows are quite high, Margaret. Statistically speaking, a few people were bound to take gravity personally." Her expression tightens. Not amused. "That's not funny." "No," you sigh. "It isn't." Silence falls. The kind that stretches. Like taffy, across the table, you sip the soup, though it tastes faintly of starch and hopelessness. She watches you, eyes soft but sharp, the look of someone who already knows the truth but is waiting for you to say it. "How bad is it?" she finally asks. You set your spoon down. It's difficult to say. The market's correcting itself. She tilts her head. Correcting itself? What does that mean? You hesitate. You could tell her the truth. That your firm lost half its assets. That clients are in a blind panic. That Jenkins took a one-way flight out a window. But what good would that do? So you take another route. It means things are unpredictable. She sighs, dabbing her lips with a napkin. You've said that every night this week. You try to smile, but it's tired, hollow. Consistency is important in uncertain times. She doesn't smile back. Instead, she reaches for the breadbasket, only one roll left, and splits it in half. "We might have to cut back," she says softly. The grocer raised prices again. You nod, staring at your soup. Of course. The dog, sensing tension, slinks under the table. You envy him. No stocks, no worries, no idea what a recession is. Margaret breaks the silence again. "I could sell the piano," she says. You look up sharply. "Don't you dare. It's just sitting there." "It's not just sitting there," you reply. "It's art. It's dignity." She meets your gaze. "We can't eat dignity. You don't have an answer for that." You both sit quietly for a moment, the only sound the ticking of that infernal clock and the occasional soft drip of soup back into your bowl. Finally, she reaches across the table and touches your hand. "We'll manage," she says. Her voice is steady, but her eyes give her away. She's scared. You squeeze her hand, though your own feels clammy. "Of course we will. After dinner?" She clears the dishes while you linger at the table, staring into the empty bowl as if the future might appear in the dregs. The house creaks. Outside, the city hums faintly, a symphony of tired engines, hollow footsteps, and distant sirens. Margaret hums softly from the kitchen. It's an old tune, one from better years, back when soup was thicker and laughter was easy. You close your eyes for a moment and let the melody carry you somewhere far away, to a version of yourself that still believed things could only go up. When she returns, she has 2 glasses. "Not whiskey," she says, "but close." She pours a splash of watered-down brandy and sits beside you. You clink glasses gently. "To correction," she says dryly. "To correction," you echo and take a sip. It burns a little, which is comforting. It feels like proof that something still works the way it's supposed to. You both sit there, side by side, the glow of the lamp flickering over the chipped china and the empty breadbasket. You don't speak again. There's nothing left to say, just 2 people pretending, not out of ignorance, but out of love. And when she finally turns off light, and you're left in the quiet dark, you realize the world may have collapsed outside, but for now, in this small, fragile home, you're still standing. And somehow, that has to count as survival. Your neighbors, once proud stockholders, now gather at the bar like refugees of bad math. They talk about how they saw it coming while borrowing cigarette money. It's like a group therapy session run entirely by denial. The bar itself is dim, one of those respectable establishments that used to cater to gentlemen of finance. Now it's a shelter for men whose fortunes have recently evaporated into thin, alcohol-scented air. The chandelier flickers weakly, as if even the electricity can't afford to stay consistent. Behind the counter, the bartender polishes glasses without enthusiasm. Because what's the point of a spotless glass when it's only filled with despair? You sit among familiar faces. Men who used to swagger into offices with gold-tipped pens and the kind of confidence that could cause structural damage. Now they sit hunched, ties loosened, collars wrinkled, counting change instead of dividends. Mitchell is there, naturally, holding court at the corner booth. "I sold before it all went south," he declares to anyone within earshot, swirling his watery whiskey like it's proof of divine foresight. Saw it coming a mile away. You'd believe him if he weren't currently trying to borrow 20 cents for the next round. Next to him sits Howard, who lost 3 houses and still insists they're temporarily misplaced assets. Every sentence he speaks begins with "in my day," even though his day was literally last Thursday. The others nod along, not out of agreement, but because it's easier than arguing with a man whose monocle budget once exceeded your rent. You order something cheap, the house gin, which tastes suspiciously like floor cleaner but gets the job done. The bartender gives you a sympathetic half-smile. He's seen enough of your kind lately to know the pattern. Walk in with a Rolex. Leave with a tab. A phonograph crackles faintly in the corner, playing a jazzy tune that used to mean success. Now it sounds like irony set to music. The men talk louder to drown it out. You hear snippets of their conversations. All the stages of grief wrapped in economic jargon. Temporary downturn. The government will step in. Gold, gentlemen, always trust gold. Each theory is more desperate than the last. You sip your drink and think, if optimism were currency, this room could buy back the market. At one point, a man you don't recognize stumbles in, his overcoat several sizes too big. Either he's lost weight or pawned the right one. He sits down and announces, "Gentlemen, I'm officially out of the market." Nobody reacts. It's like confessing to breathing. Howard claps him on the shoulder. "Chin up, old boy. These things happen. You'll bounce back." The man stares into his glass. "I sold my wife's jewelry." No one says anything after that. You can almost hear the collective sound of pride collapsing. Mitchell eventually tries to lighten the mood. "Could be worse," he says. "Could be working for wages." There's a ripple of laughter, half-hearted and brittle, but it fades quickly. The word wages hangs in the air like a bad smell, a reminder of a life they've never had to imagine until now. You glance around the bar. The polished mahogany, the old brass fixtures, the mirror behind the counter. They all look tired, like relics of a civilization that mistook money for meaning. Someone suggests forming a private investment group. Another proposes a recovery fund. The ideas flow like drinks, endless, unrealistic, and expensive. You've stopped listening. You're staring at the mirror now, at the reflection of yourself in the dim light. You look different. Older, thinner. You wonder if wealth had been your real face all along, and now you're just meeting the man underneath it. A voice cuts through the murmur. "Remember when a man's word meant something?" Someone says. "Now it's just another bad investment." The bartender laughs quietly, the kind of laugh that knows too much. "Gentlemen," he says, "the house runs tabs, not miracles." By closing time, half the men have drifted out, muttering promises to meet again next week, as if scheduling despair makes it more bearable. Mitchell is asleep in his booth. Howard's trying to settle his bill with a cufflink. You leave quietly, slipping into the cold night where the city's lights shimmer like broken glass. As you walk home, the streets echo with the faint hum of engines and laughter from somewhere wealthier, untouched. You pass the tailor's shop where you used to buy suits on credit. The window displays are dark now, mannequins still dressed for parties that no longer exist. You reach into your pocket for your last cigarette and realize you don't even have matches. You chuckle softly, the sound of someone too tired to care. Behind you, from the bar, a fragment of conversation drifts into the street. "Next week will be better." You don't look back. You know it won't. But you also know they'll keep saying it anyway. Because when the money's gone, denial is the only thing left to invest in. The next morning, you trade your Cadillac for a subway token. The smell of grease and humanity hits you like a moral lesson. You sit next to a man reading the Times, both pretending not to be broke. The train rattles through the tunnels. A long metal confession booth filled with the ghosts of comfort. Yesterday, you rode in silence through the city's glittering avenues, encased in polished steel and leather. Today, you're underground, literally and metaphorically. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks feels like punctuation to your humiliation. Every squeal of the brakes sounds like the market opening. You clutch your briefcase, empty except for dignity and a half-eaten sandwich, and stare at the reflection in the dark window. The man looking back at you wears the same suit, but it no longer fits the same life. His collar's wilted, his eyes tired. He looks like someone who has recently learned that confidence and credit are both illusions. Around you, the car is full of strangers, each one carrying their own quiet tragedy. A woman with a child balanced on her knee, humming softly over the sound of the train. A man in overalls, hands blackened from labor, asleep against the pole. A cluster of boys in newscaps laughing over nothing, because they don't know yet that laughter costs something. You shift in your seat, trying not to wrinkle what's left of your pride. Across from you, a man folds his newspaper, sighs and mutters. Another one jumped. Nobody looks up. It's not news anymore. It's routine. You stare at your shoes, polished to a dull memory of wealth, and suddenly feel ridiculous. The subway's not a place for shine. It's a place for survival. At the next stop, the doors screech open, and a rush of air carries in the scent of hot metal and coal dust. You'd give anything for the smell of fresh coffee and car polish again. A mother pulls her child closer. A worker shuffles past with a lunch pail, and you realize this is the real economy, the one that keeps moving even when the markets don't. A week ago, you would have pitied these people. Now you envy them. They have jobs, certainty, purpose. They know exactly where they stand in the world. You used to think success was about rising above everyone else. Now it feels more like trying not to fall any farther. You grip the overhead rail as the train lurches. The man next to you mutters something about a run on the banks, and you nod automatically, as if you still belong to the conversation. You don't. The markets have spoken, and your membership in the Club of Certainty has been revoked. As the train approaches 42nd Street, the crowd shifts. You notice the signs of class everywhere. The fabric of coats, the shine of shoes, the posture of exhaustion. It's an unspoken hierarchy, visible even underground. But here, even the wealthy ride quietly, stripped of chauffeurs and pretense. Everyone's equal when the lights flicker, and the air smells faintly of despair. You remember your driver, Louis, polite, punctual, loyal. You wonder where he is now, probably driving someone else's Cadillac, nodding along to someone else's optimism. You can almost hear his voice in your head. "Morning, sir. Fine day ahead." You smile bitterly. Fine day, indeed. The train screeches into Grand Central, sparks flashing in the dark like small, angry stars. You step off with the others, pushed forward by the current of the crowd. The marble hall above is packed. Men in suits moving briskly, women clutching shopping bags, all pretending that nothing's changed. You buy another token from the bored clerk behind the glass and pocket the change. The coin feels heavy. You think about how absurd it is that the value of your entire world, your career, your reputation, your security, now fits into the palm of your hand in the form of subway fare. Outside, the city hums. Cabs roll past. Chauffeurs tip their caps to men who still have reason to smile. You keep walking, the rhythm of the street blending with the echo of the train. For the first time, you're not part of the machine. You're just another gear that's fallen loose. At a corner stand, you buy a newspaper for a nickel and scan the headlines. Stocks plummet again. Breadlines grow. Beneath it, an ad for luxury automobiles. You laugh, quietly, bitterly, and fold the paper under your arm. The wind whips down Madison Avenue, biting through your overcoat. You pull your collar up, realizing the city hasn't changed at all. The only thing that's different is your vantage point. From the back seat of a Cadillac to the hard edge of a subway bench, and as you stand there, watching a fresh convoy of Tays, chauffeurs glide past, it occurs to you that maybe this is the true cost of fortune, not the money itself, but how easily it teaches you to forget the feeling of the ground beneath your feet. Your cufflinks, your watch, your dignity, all lined up on the pawnshop counter. The clerk gives you a look that says, "I've seen 1,000 of you today." You walk out with $10 and a lifetime of regret. The bell over the door jingles weakly as you step inside, the kind of sound that once meant commerce and now means surrender. The air smells of dust and desperation, a strange blend of metal polish and stale hope. The walls are lined with the ghosts of better days. Guitars that never sang, cameras that never captured joy, rings that once promised forever. Now they all wait silently for redemption that will never come. The clerk doesn't even look up when you enter. He's a man of few words and fewer illusions, wearing a green visor and an expression that could deflate ambition. He doesn't need to ask what you're here for. He can tell by your shoes, too nice for your mood, too polished for your wallet. You place your items on the counter carefully, as if handling relics of a lost civilization. The cufflinks catch the light. Little gold squares, initials engraved, a wedding gift. You hesitate, just for a second, then slide them forward. The watch follows, ticking faintly, as if protesting its demotion from heirloom to inventory. The clerk finally glances up. "Sentimental value?" he asks in a tone that suggests he already knows the answer. "Used to be," you say. He scribbles something on a pad, then opens the drawer with a sound like judgment. $10, he says flatly. You stare at him. 10? He shrugs. It's what gold's worth this week. You want to argue, to say it's worth more. Not the gold, but the memories, the hours, the self-respect. But you don't. Because this isn't a negotiation. It's confession. You nod, take the money, and try not to. Notice how light your pockets feel. Outside, the afternoon light feels harsher than it did before. You fold the bills once, twice, as though compacting your pride into something portable. The $10 sits awkwardly in your hand, warm from your palm, cold in meaning. Across the street, another pawnshop beckons, its window full of forgotten treasures. Silver flasks, wedding rings, fountain pens. There's a sick comfort in knowing you're not alone. The city is full of men just like you, trading memories for meals, futures for fractions. It's an economy built on surrender. You walk down the street slowly, passing others on the same errand. Former lawyers, salesmen, bankers, each clutching their little brown envelopes of temporary salvation. You exchange glances, silent nods of recognition. It's the closest thing you have to fellowship now, the brotherhood of the broke. You duck into a diner and order coffee, paying with one of the crumpled bills. The waitress doesn't look at you any differently. She's probably seen hundreds of men come through like this, all trying to look normal. You sip the bitter coffee and stare out the window. Across the street, another man is stepping out of the pawnshop, shoulders slumped, eyes glazed. It's like watching yourself from an hour in the future. A young boy at the counter is staring at you, maybe 12, wearing patched clothes and wide eyes. "You used to be rich, huh?" he says, half curious, half hopeful. You chuckle softly. "Did I?" He tilts his head. "My dad says rich people don't stay rich long. He says it's like the weather." You smile, a tired, crooked smile. Your dad's a smart man. When you step back outside, the sky's turned grey. You head home. Passing window displays you can't afford anymore. Watches that look suspiciously like your own. Cufflinks identical to the ones you just surrendered. You wonder if you'll ever buy them back. But you know you won't. Pawn shops deal in cash, not miracles. At the corner, you stop in front of a church. The doors are open, the candles flickering like promises. For a brief, fleeting second, you consider going in, confessing not sins, but failures. Then you remember the pawn ticket burning a hole in your pocket and decide that's penance enough. That night, you lay the $10 on your dresser beside the pawn slip. You tell yourself you'll buy everything back when the market recovers. You even say it out loud, as if speaking it might make it true. But deep down, you know the truth. You didn't just pawn your possessions. You pawned a version of yourself, the confident man who believed he could never lose. You climb into bed, the silence heavy. Outside, the city hums faintly. A million lives recalculating, repricing, renegotiating with fate. You close your eyes and promise yourself you'll get it all back someday. After all, promises are the only thing they don't take at the pawn shop. Once, you queued for IPOs. Now, you queue for soup. The man next to you used to own a yacht. Now he owns a ladle. You joke about diversifying your portfolio into chicken broth. The line stretches down the block, a slow-moving ribbon of exhaustion and wool coats that haven't been dry-cleaned since prosperity last paid a visit. You shuffle forward with the others, the smell of cabbage, steam, and human survival thick in the cold air. Your shoes, once polished to a mirror shine, now bear the grey scuffs of reality. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs, and somewhere ahead, someone mutters, "At least it's hot today." You can't tell if he means the soup or the shame. The sign above the church basement door reads, "Free meals, courtesy of Street Mary's Mission." A few months ago, you might have walked past it without looking, maybe even donated $1 out of detached kindness. Now it's your dining hall, a place where stock tickers mean nothing, but a steady ladle means everything. You keep your hands in your pockets, clutching your last cigarette like a lucky coin. Around you, the murmurs of conversation rise and fall, broken men swapping numbers, not of stocks this time, but of days since their last real meal. The man in front of you, a banker you vaguely recognize from Wall Street, turns and offers a grim smile. "Funny thing," he says, "6 months ago, I had a cook who couldn't make soup without truffles. Now I'd sell my cufflinks for more bread." You nod. "Careful," you say. "The pawn shops are paying less for cufflinks these days." He laughs, the kind of brittle laugh that sounds more like an exhale. You both fall quiet again, watching the steam drift up from the kitchen window like ghostly wealth evaporating. When you finally reach the door, the volunteer behind the counter greets you with the faintest smile. She looks young, college-aged maybe, cheeks flushed from the heat of the soup pots. "One bowl or two?" she asks. You hesitate. "Just one," you say, though your stomach disagrees. She ladles a broth into a chipped bowl and slides it toward you. The smell is incredible, real food, tangible warmth, but you wait until you're seated before taking a sip. The broth burns your tongue slightly, and you almost welcome the pain. It's proof that you still feel something. Around the long wooden tables, the conversation starts up again. Men comparing notes on odd jobs, day labor, rumors of recovery. It's a strange symphony. Hope played out of tune. A man across from you claims he's heading west to work on the railroads. Another swears there's money to be made in canned goods. You nod politely, though none of it sounds real. For most, the future has been repossessed. You glance down at your bowl, a few chunks of potato, a thin layer of oil floating on top, and think about how many fortunes were built on hungrier times. America, it seems, is an expert at recycling misery. Beside you, a young boy slurps his soup noisily. His father watches with a faint smile, spoon untouched. You offer your crust of bread to the boy. He hesitates, then takes it. "Thank you, mister." His voice is small, but it lands heavy. When you finish, you return your bowl to the counter. The volunteer nods and says, "See you tomorrow." The words are kind, but they sting. Tomorrow. You hadn't planned that far ahead. Outside, the cold air hits like punishment. The line is still long, maybe longer than before. You pull your coat tighter and glance up at the skyline. The same buildings that once symbolized success now look like tombstones. You light your cigarette and watch the smoke curl upward. It mingles with the city's breath. Steam from the soup line, smoke from the factories, all rising toward a sky that's seen this before. A man next to you mutters, "Remember when people used to stand in lines for stock certificates?" "Yeah," you say, exhaling slowly. "Now we're just waiting for lunch dividends." He chuckles softly. "At least this line pays something." You both stand there, for a moment in silence, two former investors calculating the exchange rate between pride and hunger. When you turn to leave, the church bell rings. It's lunchtime again for the city's fallen elite, brokers, barbers, clerks, dreamers, all of them now shareholders in humility. As you walk away, you pass a newsstand. The headline screams, "Market shows signs of recovery." You stop, stare at it, and laugh quietly. Recovery, you think, might be the most inflated stock of all. Then you keep walking, coat collar high, cigarette burning low, stomach half full, one of thousands trading futures for soup, and finding, somehow, that it's still better than going hungry for hope. Prohibition is still on, but so is depression, both the economic and emotional kind. You mix a concoction that tastes like disinfectant and hope. By drink number 3, you start giving investment advice again. Nobody listens. It's Saturday night, or maybe Tuesday. Days don't mean much anymore. The calendar has been replaced by the rhythm of despair, market crashes, pawnshop visits, and increasingly creative ways to get drunk without technically breaking the law. Tonight's innovation involves a chipped porcelain bathtub, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and a handful of juniper berries you found behind the grocer's. You'd call it artisanal if you weren't too busy praying it doesn't blind you. The kitchen smells like regret and ethanol. You stir the mixture with a wooden spoon, because apparently spoons are now distillery equipment. A faint hiss escapes the tub, like the drink itself is warning you to reconsider. You don't. Instead, you pour it into a teacup, because if you can't afford dignity, you can at least pretend to have manners. The first sip hits like a tax audit. The second burns its way through your regrets. By the third, you've stopped coughing long enough to feel something vaguely resembling optimism. Your face goes numb, your limbs feel loose, and suddenly, you're convinced you could explain the market collapse better than the Treasury. You stumble into the living room, teacup in hand, where your old colleagues have gathered. Fellow casualties of capitalism. each with their own bootlegged bottle of bad decisions. The furniture is mismatched, the wallpaper peeling, but there's laughter here. Bitter, broken laughter, sure, but laughter nonetheless. "Gentlemen," you announce, sloshing your drink slightly. "The key mistake was over-leverage." Mitchell groans. "The key mistake," he says, "was trusting you." You raise your cup in mock salute. "True, but at least I'm still offering free financial advice." Think of it as a public service, like a lighthouse for drunks. Howard, already half asleep on the couch, mutters, "You're more like a foghorn." The group erupts in tired laughter. It's the kind of laughter that comes from people who've run out of better options. Someone puts on a scratchy jazz record, the music crackling through the static, like a memory of better nights. For a few minutes, the air feels lighter, or maybe that's just the fumes. You pour another round, ignoring the growing suspicion that the liquid could double as paint thinner. "To the free market," you declare, "to free liquor." Someone replies, and the toast goes down smoothly, or as smoothly as industrial alcohol ever can. The conversation drifts. Someone starts reminiscing about speakeasies, those dim-lit sanctuaries of jazz and sin where you used to spend your bonuses. The irony isn't lost on you. Back then, you drank to celebrate excess. Now you drink to forget it. Across the room, a man you barely know starts ranting about Roosevelt and regulation. Another argues that bootlegging is the new entrepreneurship. "You can't arrest the American spirit," he slurs. "You can only pickle it." You nod solemnly, because it sounds profound, though you suspect it's just the gin talking. As the night drags on, the drinks flow faster, and the theories grow, bolder. Someone proposes starting a new brokerage, one that only trades in alcohol and cigarettes. "The only stable commodities left," he insists. "We'll call it the Spirit Exchange." You clap him on the back. Finally, a bull market I can drink to. Around midnight, the room tilts slightly, either from the booze or the realization that none of this means anything. The laughter fades into quiet murmurs. A few men stare at the floor, lost in thought. Others hum along to the fading record. Eyes glassy, voices low. You pour one last cup and raise it in the dim light. "To the American dream," you whisper. "May it rest in peace," someone answers. You take a sip. It's awful. You drink it anyway. The night winds down. Men stumble home through the dark. Ties loosened, hats tilted, promises slurred. You stay behind, sitting on the edge of the bathtub like it's a confessional. The liquid inside still bubbles faintly, smelling of chemicals and desperation. You think about bottling it, selling it, maybe turning your misery into a business. It wouldn't be the first time. You drain what's left of your cup, grimacing as it burns its way down. Outside, the city hums faintly, still pretending everything's fine. Somewhere in the distance, a police whistle cuts through the night, another bootlegger caught, another dream diluted. You glance at the empty bottles scattered across the floor and realize you've achieved the perfect metaphor for the decade. Everyone broke the rules, everyone got drunk on ambition, and now everyone's hungover, the whole nation nursing the same headache. You stand, steady yourself against the wall, and pour the last of the gin down the drain. The smell lingers, sharp and bitter. You whisper to the empty room, "Never again." Then you immediately start planning your next batch. You join a frantic crowd outside a bank, everyone clutching withdrawal slips like lottery tickets. The teller's smile looks painted on. It's less a financial transaction and more a synchronized panic dance. It's barely sunrise, but the line outside First National snakes around the block like a serpent made of anxiety and wool coats. You can feel the tension vibrating through the pavement, a kind of collective heartbeat powered by fear and caffeine. Men shout, women whisper, and everyone keeps glancing up at the bank's stone facade as if it might suddenly collapse under the weight of its own lies. You shuffle forward, the morning chill biting through your overcoat. In front of you, an elderly man waves his bank book like a holy relic. Behind you, a mother clutches her child in one arm and a withdrawal slip in the other, muttering a prayer under her breath. No one speaks above a murmur. It's as if too much noise might trigger the final collapse. When the doors open, the crowd surges forward. Not a stampede, exactly, but an uneasy choreography of desperation. You've never seen ballet, but you imagine it might look something like this. People spinning, lunging, colliding, all trying to maintain grace while fighting for survival. The guards shout, the tellers freeze, and the floor tiles echo with the sound of a nation's faith cracking. Inside, the air is hot, thick with sweat and perfume and panic. You catch sight of the bank manager, a man with the expression of someone who's aged 10 years overnight. His hair is slicked down. His voice trembles as he insists, "Ladies and gentlemen, your money is safe," which, of course, is the surest sign that it isn't. A man near the front slams his fist on the counter. "Then give it to me," he yells. The room goes silent for a moment, then erupts in noise. Voices overlap, arguments spark, and somewhere in the chaos, a pen breaks, splattering ink like blood. You clutch your withdrawal slip tighter. It feels absurd. One piece of paper standing between you and ruin. The teller, a young woman with trembling hands, looks up at you when your turn finally comes. Her smile is stretched, thin, brittle. "How much would you like to withdraw, sir?" "All of it," you say, trying to sound calm. She hesitates. "All of it?" "Yes," you repeat. Softer this time. "All." She nods, glances toward the manager, then opens the drawer. You can see the hesitation in her movements. Each bill she counts feels like an act of surrender. You wonder if she's thinking what you are, that once this cash leaves, it's never coming back. Behind you, the crowd presses closer. Someone mutters, "They'll run out soon." Another whispers, "They already have." The tension swells like a storm cloud. The smell of panic is tangible. Part sweat, part fear, part old paper. You take your envelope, heavy but meaningless, and step aside. The man behind you practically leaps forward, waving his slip. You glance down at the money, crisp, tangible proof that you've outpaced disaster by a few minutes. Yet somehow, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like theft, from yourself, from your neighbors, from the future. As you exit, the sound of shouting follows you onto the street. Someone's crying. Another man is arguing with the guard. The line outside has doubled. The air thick with rumors. The banks collapsing. The government's stepping in. The vaults are empty. Nobody knows what's true. Everyone's convinced they do. You cross the street and lean against a lamppost, breathing hard. The cold air stings your face, but at least it's honest. Across the road, a newsboy waves a fresh edition of the Times. The headline reads, "Banks under siege, public confidence falters." You almost laugh. Confidence feels like a cruel joke now. A luxury item for people who can still afford denial. A man next to you opens his envelope and stares at the money inside. "Feels smaller than it used to," he mutters. You nod. That's because it is. You both watch as another wave of customers pushes through the doors. It's chaos disguised as order, lines, forms, signatures, a bureaucratic mask over primal fear. The bank clerks keep up their mechanical rhythm, counting bills and repeating, "Next, please," like monks chanting to keep the world from ending. By noon, the police arrive to keep the peace. The sight of uniforms calms no one. Someone in the crowd shouts, "They're taking it all." Another responds, "There's nothing left to take." The arguments swell again. The dance resumes. You tuck your envelope deep into your coat and start walking home. The weight of the cash feels strange, heavy with guilt. You know it won't last long. Rent, groceries, maybe a few weeks of pretending. After that, who knows? At the corner, you pass another bank. A fresh crowd is already forming outside its doors. You recognize some faces. Men who were just at the first one, clutching new withdrawal slips like dance tickets to the next performance. You sigh. The ballet continues, and as you turn down the street, the sound of it follows you, the rhythm of feet on pavement, the murmur of worry, the endless refrain of "next, please." It's the music of an economy in freefall, perfectly in step, perfectly hopeless, and utterly tragically human. The radio crackles with voices promising recovery soon. You listen in the dark, the hum of static your only comfort. It's like being ghosted by the entire economy. The announcer's voice wavers, thick with false certainty, as though volume alone can sell hope. The president assures us the worst is over, he says cheerily. As if cheer were legal tender. You picture him sitting in a studio somewhere warm, hair slicked back, shoes shined, a cigarette burning elegantly between his fingers, a man untouched by soup lines, pretending to understand the sound of hunger. You sit in your chair, coat wrapped around you, the radio glowing faintly in the corner like a dying ember of civilization. It buzzes, hisses, sputters, and then briefly clears again, just long enough to let another empty promise slip through. Confidence, my friends, is the key. The public's voice insists. America's spirit cannot be broken. You take a slow sip of yesterday's coffee and think, it already is. Outside, the city is quiet. Too quiet. Even the streetcars sound tired. You can almost hear the collective holding of breath. Millions of people waiting for the miracle they've been told is coming any day now. The radio keeps feeding it to you, bite by bite, optimism disguised as news. A woman's voice cuts in, reading off stock prices as if they're still relevant. Each number is lower than the last, and every pause feels longer. You imagine her sitting there, straight-backed and professional, trying not to sound like she's announcing a funeral. Then comes the music, a soft waltz, meant to soothe the masses. It doesn't soothe, it feels more like a eulogy for an idea. The idea that progress only moves forward, that the future is a guarantee. You close your eyes, letting the static hum fill the silence between the notes. It's the only honest sound on the air. The landlord downstairs is arguing again. You can hear muffled voices through the floorboards. Something about rent, or the lack thereof. You turn the volume up. The radio's voice gets louder, drowning out reality with slogans. Buy American. Believe in the rebound. Prosperity is around the corner. It's impressive, in a bleak sort of way. How confident they sound while the nation collapses. You glance at your notebook on the table, a list of expenses. Each line crossed out more reluctantly than the last. You've started ranking your bills in order of emotional attachment. Electricity currently ranks third. But the radio stays on. It's your last luxury, your last illusion of connection. When the news breaks again, it's about another factory closing. The announcer's tone doesn't change. He transitions straight into an advertisement for toothpaste. A brighter smile for brighter days ahead, he says. You laugh, the kind of low, bitter laugh that surprises even you. Brighter days? You'd settle for warmer ones. You twist the dial, looking for something real, something unscripted, something human. You land on a late-night jazz program, broadcasting from Chicago. The sound is faint, the static swallowing every third note. But it's alive. You can hear the saxophone's breath, the slight crack in the singer's voice, the improvisation that refuses to care about the economy. For a moment, You let yourself believe that not everything is falling apart, that maybe, somewhere, people are still creating, still living, still ignoring the headlines. But when the music fades, the voice returns. Another announcer, another sermon on faith and fortitude. He says words like stability and growth, as though repetition can make them real again. Keep your savings in the bank, he urges, which is particularly hilarious given you just watched a bank dissolve into chaos yesterday. The radio crackles again, a long, steady burst of static, before cutting to silence. The light fades from its dial, and for a moment you think it's dead. You tap the side gently, a ritual born from desperation, and the voice sputters back to life. Distorted, but recognizable. Better times are coming, it says. Stay the course. You lean back in your chair, arms folded, staring at the dark ceiling. The hum returns, softer this time, blending with the wind outside. You can't tell anymore which sound is the machine and which is the world. The static grows louder again, waves of sound with no signal, no message, just noise. And yet, somehow, it's comforting, honest even. Static doesn't lie. It doesn't promise recovery, or prosperity, or tomorrow. It just is. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you, that endless hiss of nothing. Somewhere deep in the noise, you imagine you hear truth, that everything will end and everything will begin again, but not yet, not tonight. For now, you sit in the dark, listening to the radio hum and pretending that someone, somewhere, still knows what they're talking about. You and your peers start meeting at the park to feed pigeons, mainly because they're cheaper than lunch. You discuss philosophy now, mostly the kind that fits into a paper cup of gin. The park has become your new office. A bench under a skeletal elm tree has replaced your desk. And instead of a secretary, you have an entire committee of pigeons reporting directly to your crumbs. The morning light filters through bare branches, pale and hesitant, as if even the sun feels awkward about shining on so much collective failure. Once upon a time, this park was just scenery on your commute, a blur of green glimpsed through the window of a chauffeured car. Now, it's a congregation ground for the fallen upper crust. The unemployed elite, as you've started calling yourselves, meet here daily between 11 and 2, the hours when pretending to have a job would be most suspicious. Mitchell's here, as always, dressed like he's still headed to the exchange. Bowler hat polished, shoes shined. It's admirable. In a tragic way, he tears a roll into neat little pieces for the pigeons, like a man still clinging to order in a world that's forgotten what it means. Routine, he says, is how civilization survives. Civilization? Howard snorts, sipping from his paper cup. We're sharing gin with birds, Mitchell. Better company than bankers, you add. And everyone nods. The pigeons coo in agreement. Howard's wearing the same overcoat he's had for years, though now it's frayed at the cuffs. He used to be a broker. Now he's an expert in finding half-smoked cigars on the sidewalk. There's a trick to it, he explains once. Most men drop them in anger. I pick them up in acceptance. The talk drifts, as it always does, from politics to poetry to the art of pretending you're fine. Someone suggests investing in peanut futures, just for the irony. Someone else claims to have heard a rumor that the government's planning a rescue package. The phrase sounds exotic, like a vacation you can't afford. You take a slow sip of gin, which tastes like poverty's cologne, and watch the pigeons fight over crumbs. There's something oddly comforting about their chaos. Honest, unpretentious, efficient. They don't worry about the market or moral hazard. They just take what's in front of them and keep pecking. At noon, the park fills with more familiar faces, men who once held positions, titles, reputations. Now they hold paper cups, folded newspapers, and conversations that sound like philosophy but smell like denial. One man quotes Nietzsche. Another misquotes him. Someone brings up self-reliance, and everyone groans. You talk about jobs, of course, but never directly. I'm exploring opportunities, Mitchell says, which you all know means nothing. Doing consulting work, Howard offers, which means thinking about asking my cousin for a loan. You contribute your favorite euphemism, keeping flexible, translation, unemployed, but still wearing a tie. A passing woman tosses breadcrumbs for the pigeons and gives your group a polite, pitying smile, the kind reserved for beggars who still use cologne. Mitchell straightens his hat. We're feeding them, he mutters defensively. Not the other way around. The afternoon stretches thin. The gin's gone, replaced by lukewarm conversation. Someone starts whistling Ain't Misbehavin', and the tune floats through the cold air like irony on the wind. You tilt your head back and look at the grey sky, thinking how it mirrors the stock chart that ruined you, one long downward slope. Eventually, the park empties out, one by one. The club members drift away, off to apartments they can barely afford or boarding houses they won't admit to living in. Mitchell lingers, sweeping crumbs off his coat. We'll be fine, he says, almost convincing himself. America always bounces back. You nod, though neither of you sound convinced. Sure, you reply. But do we? He laughs softly, pats you on the shoulder, and wanders off down the path. The pigeons follow him, loyal investors in crumbs and delusion. You stay a while longer, watching the sunlight fade through the trees. Across the park, a man in a threadbare coat plays the trumpet. Not well, but with feeling. The notes wobble and echo off the empty benches. You toss your last crust of bread toward the pigeons and stand up. As you walk home, the gin's warmth fades, replaced by the familiar ache of uncertainty. On the corner, a newsboy shouts about a new relief bill, his voice bright, with hope he doesn't understand. You buy a paper just to feel the weight of it, then toss it into a trash bin unread. You think about tomorrow, the same bench, the same pigeons, the same conversation about nothing. It's not work, not really, but it's structure. And in times like these, that's almost enough. The sun dips low as you reach your building. You pause at the door, glance back at the park, and realize something quietly profound. The pigeons will still be there tomorrow, whether you show up or not. It's strangely comforting. Stability, it turns out, just has feathers now. Someone suggests putting what little money you have left into toaster futures. You nod. At this point, it sounds less insane than trusting the market again. The American dream now comes with a foreclosure notice. You're sitting in a diner that smells like burnt coffee and anxiety. The booths are cracked, the linoleum floor is sticky, and the only thing stronger than the coffee is the collective delusion that things will somehow get better. Around you sits what's left of your investment circle. Men who used to wear confidence like cologne. Now they wear the same tired look, a blend of hunger, caffeine, and disbelief. Mitchell leans forward over his half-eaten plate of eggs. Toaster futures, he says again. This time with the authority of a man who's been drinking since noon. People might stop buying stocks, but they'll never stop buying toast. There's a pause. Nobody laughs, but nobody disagrees either. In 1929, the line between brilliance and insanity has completely eroded. They're trading places faster than the Dow. Howard, ever the skeptic, stirs his coffee with the focus of a man trying to read the future in its surface. And how do we invest in that exactly, Mitchell? You going to buy a warehouse full of bread? Mitchell waves a dismissive hand. You joke, but mark my words. Simple luxuries. That's where the money will be. Bread, butter, socks, things that make misery more tolerable. You take a slow sip of your own coffee, which tastes faintly like disappointment and nickel shavings. I was thinking about matches, you mutter. Everyone needs light in the dark. The group hums in agreement, though no one's really listening. You've all said enough ridiculous things in the last few months that logic has given up trying to keep up. In the corner booth, a man you vaguely recognize from the exchange is pitching home coal delivery franchises to anyone who will listen. It's the future, he insists, slapping a brochure that looks like it was printed on borrowed hope. Heat is recession-proof. Across the room, a group of younger men are sketching ideas for a new kind of investment firm, one that will guarantee protection from panic. You almost envy their optimism. It's adorable in a tragic sort of way. The waitress slides by, refilling cups. She looks tired but kind, like someone who's been surviving a long time without needing theories to do it. You boys talking business again? She asks with a smirk. Mitchell grins. Always, sweetheart. That's how we stay alive. She raises an eyebrow. You sure it's working? Nobody answers. She tops off your cup and walks away. And for a long moment, the only sound is the hiss of the coffee pot and the low hum of the ceiling fan. You all sit there, staring into your cups, like they contain stock quotes from a better world. The truth is, there's nothing left to invest in but illusions. You used to believe in growth, in opportunity, in the myth that money always finds its way back. Now you'd settle for a steady paycheck and a working toaster. Howard breaks the silence. I hear some fellas are putting their money into farmland, he says. You know, actual dirt. Apparently it's safer than paper. Mitchell snorts. Dirt's what we'll all be eating soon enough. You smile faintly. At least it's local. A few scattered laughs echo through the diner, weary, hollow, but real. For a moment, it almost feels like camaraderie instead of collapse. Outside, you can see people walking by, some briskly, others slowly, everyone pretending they're headed somewhere important. The city looks the same, but it isn't. Every window seems darker, every step a little heavier. When the bill comes, you all stare at it like it's another economic indicator. Nobody moves. Finally, Mitchell sighs and throws down a few coins. I'll put it on my tab, he jokes. Assuming tabs are still a thing, you step out into the cold, collar pulled up, the sound of laughter still lingering faintly behind you. On the corner, a man is selling newspapers. The headline screams, "Market recovery imminent." You glance at it, shake your head, and keep walking. Mitchell catches up beside you, hands shoved deep in his pockets. You know, he says, I wasn't joking about those toasters. I know, you reply. That's what worries me. The two of you walk in silence for a while, boots clicking against the pavement. The city hums around you, a machine still running on fumes. Somewhere in the distance, a radio plays a jazz tune about luck and love, both equally fictional. By the time you part ways, night has settled in. You reach into your pocket, counting the few crumpled bills left. Not much, but enough for tomorrow's coffee. You glance back at the diner window, the warm glow spilling onto the cold street, and realize that, for all the madness, you'll probably be back there again tomorrow, because the truth is, no one's investing for profit anymore. You're all just buying time, one cup of coffee, one foolish idea, one desperate conversation at a time. Wall Street at night feels haunted. The lamps flicker over empty offices. The city hums like a nervous breakdown on repeat. Somewhere, a janitor sweeps up dreams printed on ticker tape. You walk down the street with your collar turned up against the wind, shoes echoing off the cold stone canyon of the financial district. The skyscrapers tower above you like tombstones carved from ambition. Their windows, dark and vacant, reflect nothing but your own ghostly outline, another lost soul pacing through the aftermath of prosperity. Once, this street pulsed with energy. Deals were shouted through open windows, papers fluttered like confetti, and champagne corks popped like gunfire in celebration. Now, the only sound is the distant clang of a trolley and the soft whisper of wind threading through the narrow alleys. The ticker machines are silent, their last lines of code spelling out despair in black ink. A light burns in one window, the lone survivor of the day's chaos. Inside, a clerk works overtime, his sleeves rolled up, eyes hollow, sorting through the wreckage of other people's fortunes. You imagine his hands shaking as he counts numbers that no longer matter. The glow of his desk lamp casts a halo on the glass, a small sun in an otherwise lifeless galaxy. Farther down the street, a doorman leans against a marble column outside a shuttered bank. He smokes slowly, the tip of his cigarette glowing like a warning beacon. "They say it'll come back," he mutters when you pass. "Money, I mean." You nod, though neither of you believes it. He takes another drag and adds, "Everything comes back eventually, even ghosts." You keep walking. The wind picks up, carrying scraps of paper down. The street, torn ledgers, receipts, ticker tape. One curls around your leg like a stray cat. You pick it up. It's a line of numbers, faded and smudged. For a moment, you recognize a name, a company you once trusted, once bet everything on. You let it go, and it flutters away into the night, one more worthless relic joining the others. The silence feels almost sacred. Even the rats move quietly here, as though paying respects. The air smells faintly of ink, smoke, and the metallic tang of failure. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls midnight. 12 perfect notes for a city that refuses to sleep. You stop at the steps of the exchange, the great marble temple to greed and glory. Its columns loom above you, still proud despite the ruin. The bronze doors are locked. But the faint hum of the city seems to vibrate through the stone, as if the building itself is whispering, "We'll open again." You stand there for a moment, imagining the roar of the trading floor, the frenzy, the arrogance, the false immortality. It's hard to believe it ever existed. A janitor emerges from the side entrance, pushing a broom, his shoulders bent under the weight of the night. You watch as he sweeps piles of ticker tape into a bin, fragments of fortunes that once moved nations. "Must be strange," you say quietly, "cleaning up the mess of millionaires." He shrugs. "Paper's paper," he says. Burns the same either way. He disappears down the street, broom scraping softly against the pavement, leaving you alone again with the ghosts. You tilt your head back, staring up at the skyline. The buildings seem to lean inward, listening, waiting. The wind whistles through the gaps like a sigh. You light a cigarette, cupping the flame against the breeze, and inhale the smoke like it's oxygen. The streetlights flicker, one goes out completely, plunging half the block into shadow. You imagine the city holding its breath, waiting for dawn, waiting for redemption. Somewhere, far away, a radio plays faintly, a tinny jazz melody drifting through an open window. The sound is distant, fragile, human. You follow it, turning a corner onto Broad Street, where a few drunks huddle in doorways, murmuring about getting back in the game. Their laughter is low and broken, but it's laughter all the same. You reach the end of the street and pause, looking back one last time. Wall Street stretches behind you like a dark river, empty, but not dead. You realize it's still alive, not in triumph, but in endurance. Even stripped of its glory, it breathes. You exhale, flick the cigarette into the gutter, and turn away. The glow fades behind you as the city groans softly into another sleepless night. Wall Street doesn't rest. It just waits, patient, hungry, humming quietly to itself in the dark, already dreaming of its next rise and the next fall that will follow. You find work shouting about soap on a street corner. 2 for a nickel! You yell, trying to sound enthusiastic. The irony isn't lost on you. You used to sell illusions for a living. Now you sell bubbles. The wind bites at your face as you stand at the corner of Broadway, and 42nd, your voice already hoarse from the morning's effort. The box of soap sits at your feet. Plain brown bars wrapped in paper that promises luxury in a font you can't afford to believe in. You hold one up to the passing crowd like a prize, calling out, "Best soap in the city! Smells like success!" No one laughs. They just keep walking, hats pulled low, collars up, eyes fixed somewhere safer than reality. The street is full of men like you now, former professionals, now professional survivors. Every corner has one. You can tell the ex-bankers by their shoes, still polished, even if the rest of them aren't. You glance at the reflection in a shop window and almost don't recognize yourself. The sharp suit has lost its edge, the tie's gone soft, and the face staring back at you looks older than it has any right to. You take a breath and start shouting again, voice cracking halfway through. "Buy one, get one free." A few people stop, not to buy, but to look. You've become entertainment now. A street performer in the theater of collapse. A man in a bowler hat smirks. "Didn't I see you on Wall Street once?" he says, dropping a coin into your box. Not for the soap, but for the spectacle. You force a smile. "Probably," you say. "Different kind of bubbles. Same result." He laughs and walks away. You pocket the coin. Humiliation spends just as well as pride. By noon, your voice is shot and your fingers ache from the cold. You've sold maybe half your stock. Not bad, considering most people can't afford bread, let alone soap. You think briefly about your old office, the one with the big oak desk and the leather chair. The irony burns. Back then, you worked yourself to exhaustion selling abstract dreams. Now, you're exhausted selling something that actually exists. A woman with a small child stops in front of you. She eyes the bars carefully, then asks, "Is it pure?" You pause. You could lie. You used to be good at that. But you just shake your head. "No, ma'am. But it's clean." She nods, buys one, and walks away. It's the most honest transaction you've made all year. As the afternoon sun starts to fade, a man selling apples sets up across the street. You trade glances, comrades in misfortune. "Good business?" he calls out. You shrug. "Depends on your definition of business." He grins. "At least, soap doesn't rot." You chuckle and nod. He's right. The new economy has strange advantages. You can't short sell soap, and you can't lose it to the bank. For the first time in months, you're selling something real, tangible, fragrant proof that you still exist. Still, as the day winds down and the streets begin to empty, a hollowness settles in. The city feels heavier in the evenings now. You gather your unsold bars, counting them like losses on a balance sheet. 23. You started with 50, a small profit, if you don't count dignity as a cost. As you pack up, a teenager approaches. "Mister," he says shyly, "how'd you end up doing this?" You look at him. Sharp eyes, hungry expression. You recognize the same ambition that once drove you. "Bad math," you say simply. And, worse, timing. He nods, as if that explains everything, and maybe it does. You walk home through the cold, the box tucked under your arm. Each step echoes in the street like punctuation marks in a story you never meant to write. The lamplight spills across the pavement, turning the city gold and grey all at once. You pass the old brokerage building, dark now, lifeless, and catch sight of the faded lettering still etched into the stone. Confidence and Co. You stop. Just for a moment. Confidence, you whisper, letting the word linger. You used to sell it by the pound. Now, you're lucky to have a gram left. You turn away, heading toward your small rented room, and the meager dinner waiting there. Tomorrow, you'll be back on the same corner, voice cracking, selling soap to strangers. Maybe you'll even believe your own pitch this time. After all, selling bubbles is nothing new. It's just that now, for once, they're real. At night, you write letters to old clients. Apologies, promises, lies. You never send them. They're confessions written to ghosts. And to yourself. The room is small, lit only by a single lamp that flickers like it's uncertain about staying alive. The wallpaper is yellowed, curling at the edges, and the air smells faintly of ink and dust. The scent of both guilt and habit. On the desk sits a stack of paper, a bottle of cheap gin, and a fountain pen that leaks just enough to ruin every third page. It's a ritual now. You drink, you write, you regret. Then you start over. The letters always begin the same way. Dear Mr. Thompson, I'm deeply sorry for your loss. You never specify which one, his money, his business, or his faith in you. Sometimes you add, we all believed the market would recover. Other times, you try for humor. If it's any comfort, I lost everything too. It never sounds right. Nothing does. You pause to sip the gin, grimace, and stare at the half-filled page. The pen scratches on, but the words feel weightless. What can you possibly say to the people whose fortunes you helped bury? You were a salesman of optimism, a professional persuader of dreams, and they trusted you. You told them the numbers would rise, that the system was sound, that America would always move upward. Now you know better. Gravity applies to everything, even hope. The clock ticks. Outside, a dog barks. The city hums faintly beyond the window, muted, like a gramophone turned down too low. You think about all the other rooms like yours across New York, each filled with men doing the same thing, replaying mistakes, counting ghosts. Somewhere out there, Jenkins's widow is probably staring at her own stack of unpaid bills, wondering what any of it was for. You dip the pen again and start another. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I hope you and the children are well. You stop, scratch that out. You don't really hope for anything anymore. You continue anyway. I assure you, your husband's investments were made in good faith. No one could have predicted the crash. Another lie. You did predict it, or at least felt it coming, that sick, invisible pressure before everything buckled, but you stayed silent because everyone was making too much money to listen to reason. Your handwriting wavers as the gin settles in. The lines drift, words blurring into smudged apologies. You catch yourself signing your name over and over again, as if repetition could erase responsibility. Yours truly, sincerely, regretfully, eternally indebted. Sometimes you write to people who don't exist, clients you made up to practice remorse. Dear Mr. Nobody, I should have known better. Dear Misfortune, I should have sold sooner. You fold these too and stack them neatly in the drawer, beside all the real ones. The pile grows taller every week. There's a strange comfort in it. Writing to people you'll never face is easier than speaking to those you still can. The letters let you rewrite the story, if only for a few paragraphs, a version where you were the victim, not the villain. You imagine for a moment what would happen if you actually sent them. The headlines the next day. Disgraced broker floods clients with apologies. Some would laugh, some would burn them, and maybe one or two would read them and cry. You can't decide which outcome would hurt more. The gin bottle empties slowly. Your hand trembles now. From exhaustion or emotion, you can't tell. You lean back in your chair and glance at the drawer stuffed full of sealed envelopes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, none addressed, none stamped. They're not letters, not really. They're confessions trapped in paper. You pull one out at random and unfold it. The ink faded slightly where a tear must have landed, though you don't remember crying. It reads, "I didn't mean to ruin anyone. I just wanted to belong to something bigger than myself." You stare at the words for a long time, then fold it back up and return it to its resting place. The lamp flickers again. You think about turning it off, but the dark feels too honest. You pick up your pen instead and start another letter. This one begins differently. "Dear future me, stop writing." You chuckle under your breath. You know you won't. The letters have become your nightly ritual, your proof of penance. You'll keep writing until the ink runs dry, or your conscience finally does. Outside, the wind rattles the window pane. You look up, half expecting to see one of your ghosts standing there. A client, a friend, a reflection of who you used to be, but it's just you, framed in glass, holding a pen like a priest clutching confession. You set the pen down and blow on the latest page, watching the ink glisten wetly in the dim light. Then you place it atop the others, neatly stacked, perfectly unsent. The city murmurs outside, restless as ever. You pour one last drink, raise it to no one in particular, and whisper, "Here's to what might have been." And then, with the careful precision of guilt, you begin the next letter. Your building grows quieter each week. Families move out, rent unpaid. The only sound left is the echo of elevator doors that no longer have anywhere to go. The hallway feels longer than it used to, a dim tunnel of faded wallpaper and hollow footsteps. You can hear your own breathing, soft and deliberate, like you're afraid to disturb the stillness that has settled over everything. Once this place was alive, laughter behind doors, dinner smells drifting through vents, the click of typewriters and the chatter of evening radio shows. Now, it feels like a mausoleum for the middle class. Mrs. Lang from 4B left first. She used to greet everyone with cookies and unsolicited advice about the stock market, both of which aged poorly. When her husband's savings evaporated, she packed what little she had into 2 trunks and moved in with her sister uptown. "Just for a few weeks," she said. That was 3 months ago. Her door is still sealed with tape, her name half torn from the brass plaque. Then the Mortons from 5C disappeared. They didn't tell anyone. They just stopped coming home. You remember hearing the landlord pounding on their door one morning, shouting about overdue rent, until he realized there was nothing left inside but a stack of unpaid bills and an empty crib. The silence that followed was worse than any shouting could have been. Now, when you walk down the corridor, only a few lights flicker on. The janitor stopped replacing the bulbs weeks ago. "No budget," he muttered, before he, too, vanished. Dust collects along the baseboards, and the once grand staircase smells faintly of mildew and loss. At night, you hear the wind whistle through cracked window panes. It sounds almost like whispers, faint voices from neighbors who've become ghosts of their own bad luck. Sometimes you catch yourself listening, as if the walls are trying to tell you what went wrong. The elevator still works, though no one uses it. It creaks and moans like an old man with arthritis, stopping at floors where no one waits. Once, while coming home late, you heard it open on the third floor and close again, though the entire floor has been vacant for weeks. You told yourself it was just a draft. You didn't entirely believe it. The superintendent, a stoic man named Hal, still makes his rounds. You see him some mornings, sweeping the lobby that no one enters anymore. "Any new tenants?" you asked once. He laughed, not out of humor, but habit. "Nobody's renting," he said. "They're all leaving. The building's holding its breath." Sometimes you sit in the stairwell with a cigarette, staring out the small window that overlooks the alley. You can see the next building over, just as empty, just as tired. A few windows glow faintly, lonely constellations in the city's dark. Somewhere below, a cat knocks over a trash can, and you flinch at the sudden sound. It's strange how quickly silence becomes your only companion. One night, a note appears under your door. It's handwritten, shaky, "Leaving tomorrow. Can't do this anymore, Mrs. Keller." 6A. You hadn't spoken to Mrs. Keller in weeks, but you remember her laugh, her little dog that barked at everything. You fold the note and tuck it into a drawer. The next morning, her door is wide open, the apartment stripped bare. The dog's gone too. Days blur. The halls echo differently now, like the building itself is hollowing out. You can hear the faint hum of the radiator, trying to pretend it still has purpose. The air smells faintly of rust and loneliness. You start to notice details you'd ignored before. The scuffed floorboards, the water stains creeping across the ceiling like slow-moving vines. The wallpaper near your door is peeling. Beneath it, the faint outline of older paper, a forgotten pattern from a better decade. Sometimes, when you lie awake, you can hear faint footsteps from the floors above. They stop whenever you get up to check. Maybe it's Hal. Maybe it's memory. In the mornings, you walk down to the lobby. The mailboxes gape open, most of them empty. The brass fixtures are dull now, tarnished by neglect. The front doors, once polished daily, are streaked with grime. Through the glass, you see the city still moving, still loud, but it feels a world away. You pick up a discarded newspaper from the floor. The headline screams about unemployment and unrest. Beneath it, a smaller story. Tenants evicted as rent defaults surge. You fold it, drop it into the trash, and listen to it echo in the hollow bin. As you climb back up the stairs, you notice something new. A single light still shining at the end of the hall. You pause, listening. There's no sound, just that faint, steady glow. For a moment, it feels like hope, fragile and flickering, refusing to die. You turn your key, step into your apartment, and close the door behind you. The silence greets you like an old friend. You take a deep breath and whisper to no one, "Still here." Outside, the elevator creaks again, rising, stopping, and sighing open on another empty floor. Every corner now has someone shouting about divine punishment or honest labor. You start to think they might have a point, until one of them tries to sell you his sermon for 25 cents. You can't walk 3 blocks anymore without running into one. They sprout like weeds between the cracks of the city. Self-appointed prophets of ruin, standing on crates that once held oranges, now filled with revelation. They wave their Bibles like stock reports, their voices cracking against the wind. "Repent," they cry. The market was God's warning. At first, you ignore them. Everyone does. You keep your head down, pretending to study the cracks in the sidewalk. pretending not to hear the desperate rhythm of faith replacing finance. But their words cling to you like smoke. Greed brought the fall. One bellows as you pass. You'd argue if you could afford the energy. Instead, you keep walking, clutching your empty briefcase like a talisman from your former life. The city feels different now, louder and quieter all at once. The honking cars, the shouting vendors, the scraping of feet on pavement, all underscored by the new soundtrack of damnation. Each voice competes to be the loudest savior. They shout over one another like traders used to on the exchange floor. The irony stings. One preacher, a burly man with a beard that looks like it was carved from despair, corners you near the bank steps. "You!" he cries, pointing his finger as if you've just been subpoenaed by heaven itself. "You were one of them, weren't you? One of the gamblers." You blink, caught mid-step. "I was a broker," you say automatically. He slams his Bible shut like he's closing the market bell. Same thing. He launches into a tirade about sin, about speculation, about how the crash was divine justice for men who thought they could outsmart eternity. You let him talk. It's easier than arguing. When he finally pauses for breath, he says, "For a quarter, I'll tell you how to redeem your soul." You almost laugh. Almost. "No thank you," you say, stepping around him. "I'm on a budget." Behind you, he calls out, "Then hell is all you can afford." You keep walking. He's not wrong. Further down the street, a younger preacher is handing out pamphlets titled "The Gospel of Hard Work." His voice is calm, steady, persuasive, the kind that could sell anything, even faith. The Lord rewards labor. He tells a small crowd of listeners, not laziness, not gambling, not greed. You linger for a moment at the edge of the crowd. His words sting more than the older man's shouting. They sound reasonable, dangerous in their reason. A woman near you nods. "He's right," she whispers. "We got too proud." You think of your old office. The shouts, the arrogance, the champagne. Pride? Yes. But it wasn't pride that broke you. It was belief. Belief in a system that promised miracles and delivered math. The preacher locks eyes with you. "Brother," he says, smiling thinly, "are you ready to work for your salvation?" "I've been working for survival," you reply. "Salvation doesn't pay rent." He blinks, then hands you a pamphlet anyway. You'll change your mind. You fold it into your pocket and leave. Later, in your apartment, you unfold it. The inside is full of handwritten scrawls. Hope through labor. Work is prayer. God helps those who help themselves. You stare at it until the words blur. Then use it to light your cigarette. By nightfall, the preachers are still out there, shouting to the cold sky. Their torches flicker in the wind, casting long shadows across the brick walls. The city looks ancient suddenly, as though it's reverted to something medieval. A place where plague, poverty and piety all share the same street corner. You pass one last preacher on your way home, standing in the glow of a lamppost. He's quieter than the rest, older, his voice almost gentle. "We're all just trying to make sense of it," he says. Not to you, but to the darkness. The rich, the poor, the wicked, the faithful. The Lord doesn't care about your stocks, only your soul. You stop. "And if I've already sold that?" you ask. He looks up, his eyes soft but unreadable. "Then pray for a refund." You walk on, the sound of his words following you into the empty night. You light another cigarette, watch the smoke curl upward, dissolving into the cold air. Maybe there's a kind of faith in that, believing the smoke might rise higher than you ever could. At the corner, the last of the preachers closes his Bible and packs up. His voice fades behind you, swallowed by the city's hum. For a moment, the silence feels sacred. You stop, look up at the dark towers looming above, and whisper to no one, Amen. Then you keep walking, your breath and the winter wind the only sermons left. And so tonight, as you drift between sleep and the faint hum of your fan, take a moment to think about those poor souls of 1929, the men in suits who mistook optimism for a business strategy, who stared at ticker tapes like fortune cookies gone wrong, who learned the hard way that the market doesn't care how nice your hat is. They lived through a time when dreams were bought on credit and paid for in tears, when hope came in short supply, but bad whiskey was always available. And somehow, they survived. They sold their cars, pawned their cufflinks, lined up for soup, and still found a way to laugh. Because even when everything collapses, people keep showing up to talk, to work, to rebuild. The Great Depression wasn't just a story of financial ruin. It was a story of stubborn resilience, of families squeezing into one apartment, of bankers turning into barbers, of strangers sharing what little they had. It's proof that when the world goes broke, humor is the last currency left. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your clean bed, with Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and the gentle assurance that your savings app has a password, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the people who came before you. The ones who endured breadlines, bounced checks, and the crushing silence of an empty office. The ones who proved that falling isn't the same as failing. Because history may be ridiculous, grim, and painfully ironic, but it's also endlessly human. And in that strange, humbling way, it's kind of beautiful. Now, close your eyes. Forget the tickers, the stocks, the skyscrapers. You've survived another day in the present, and that's already more than most of 1929 could say. Sleep well, and may your dreams rise steadily without ever crashing.